Okay, so in this part I'm going to talk about some of the brushes and canvas settings and layers that I use. So as you can see right here, this is the canvas settings, and if you open this up, you can look at your canvas collection, and you've got everything from art papers to different types of canvas to special papers that you might have made or collected or scanned in. So I tend to use rougher canvases just because it gives me that that tooth that I'm looking for when I drag a palette knife against it. So in this case here, I'm going to show you, I'm using this cotton rag watercolor paper right now, and I'm going to show you some of the brushes that I use for my pieces. So if I come in here to the brushes and click it, you can see I've got different types of brushes that ship standard, with Art Rage. And the one that I tend to use a lot is either I use a thick gloss or an everlasting oil. And you'll see here if I come in and pick a color and increase my brush size. Let me get my brush size up. And what is going on? Oh, the color. It didn't pick the color last time. Let me just make a color up. There we go. So if I zoom in on this, you can see that as you press down, I'm actually getting bristles that start to show up as far as like 3D thick paint. And if I really come into like a thick gloss brush, you can really see that look. So there's a delicate balance of what I want to replicate in terms of showing these bristles, but not have it become too cheesy or look like some effect. So I'll usually lay it down real heavy, and then I'll come in and I'll either blend it with different pressure and different cross hatching of the actual strokes, or I'll grab a palette knife and I'll knock that down. And you can see here, just darkening my value a bit, and scrubbing back and forth in different directions. You can start to make that 3D shine, that specular highlight on the paint start to go away. And so there's definitely a balance between what I'm trying to achieve visually and stylistically. So again, these are some of the brushes I'll use to lay down initial form. My favorite is a palette knife that is modified from the Hard Out Smudge. So the Hard Out Smudge brush, what it does essentially is it's a palette knife, and as you can see, that rotation of the line within the circle, that's the palette knife and how my hand is positioned. So what it does, without any paint on it, it's essentially just dragging the paint. And again, as I mentioned, you can go in and blend out the shininess of the paint, because essentially what you're doing is you're rubbing that paint down into the canvas and it's disappearing. And if you start pushing real hard, you can start to make some of that come back based on you're applying thick paint over and over again in a particular area, and it will start to gloss over. But I will use this to use as like a blender or a mixer, or areas where I want to come in and adjust the paint I've already put down. Now, I've made my own modified version over here of CG Knife 1 and 2, and essentially what they're doing is they're adding right here, if you can see where I'm at, loading 8%. Essentially, it's like putting paint on the knife. So now, instead of just blurring existing paint, I'm actually painting with a little bit of paint on the brush. Now, the higher I take that loading, the more 3D thickness the paint will become. But in my case, for a lot of my brushes, I'm only putting a little bit, because I'd rather work back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with many brush strokes and kind of build up, what I'm looking for. And then the minute you start to add in, a little bit of another color, or even, value in color, you can see that you can start to get, a lot more complexity in the look of it. And this is that I was talking about having edges and squariness to some of my brush strokes and my style, and that largely comes from this type of brush. Going in and making these kind of strokes, and then blending them back out. So if I come in here with a darker, we can start to work on some value of what perhaps might be some sort of like beginnings of a tree or whatever happen to be painting. So That's a brush that, like I said, is commonly used, and then the last one I use a lot, like almost all the time, is a blending marker. And you can see it from the markers here. I've got different types of markers, but the blending marker has been, really good because of the pressure sensitivity. If I just barely press at all, I'm getting a thin line. If I push down hard, I'm getting thick. And if I, mix that in the middle of my stroke, I can go from thick to thin to thick. But it also, as you see, it's got a very transparent wash to it. So what I like about it is I can paint over and over and over an area, and I can build up, color and value just by, building up my strokes with lots and lots of repetition on it. And then I love how it handles blending of another color into it. So same thing I just showed is I'm picking a different value in color, and now I can come in and I can start to work that into the value that was there, even color picking and blending it too. But that kind of brush strokes, those are I've been using those for leaves or hitting certain areas within trees or landscapes that I might need to sort of blend down but also add color at the same time, and definitely pop like highlights and different things. In fact, if I pick a pure white here, a lot of my leaves that have that sky shown through are due to this brush, because I'm able to go in and start to just put these little light pockets of where the sky is showing through the leaves, and you can do that, and working it back and forth will blend with the existing color, or I can really go in strong and keep pushing to get a really, really, really bright highlight. Maybe I'll color pick up something near it, close that hole a little bit, branches that end up coming through it like that, and you'll see, blending that in. So that's pretty much, those are the tools I use a lot. I do another one I'll show you just real quick since I have it here is I love the roller brush, particularly the dry roller brush. I love that, again, it's directional. I love how it shows the paper texture through. If I barely push right there, you can actually see the paper grain showing through. And then what's nice again is that if I keep going back and forth, depending on pressure sensitivity, I can build up color and paint. But this one here is a real good texture tool for me, when I want to go back in and build up texture. And because this paint is so thin out here, it's not doing a whole lot of blending of color, because there's a very, very, very thin application of this roller brush. But if I bring this roller brush into an area that has thick paint into it, you can see that it reacts to that. It pulls the paint. It will add texture if I work it back and forth and back and forth. You'll start to see the paper grain come through, especially if I'm pushing hard. But the nice thing is if I push real light, it's kind of like a palette knife. It's blending and adding paint and using the existing paint that was there. There's a good example of you seeing it grab that brighter green and dragging it into the existing brush stroke. And last thing, and we'll move on to the next chapter, is if you guys have never used Art Rage, or let me show you one of the things I do. This here is a paint tube, so literally I am squeezing out thick paint, and then I'll come back in with a palette knife, and I'll usually grab that hard out smudge brush that I showed you earlier, and I'll drag that. Then on pressure sensitivity, I can knock down a lot of that gloopiness, but I keep just a little bit of it that starts to add that dimensionality, if that's important to me. So here I'll go back to the tube brush, now add a little bit of yellow. We'll go to our palette knife and we'll mix that into the green. You can start to get a sense of like 3D paint was applied, especially if I zoom in a little bit here. Start to get that kind of look of 3D paint. So for next chapter, I'll start talking about layers and opacity.